couple more people joining here. All right, Jose's coming in. So looks like over the weekend, successfully rolled out PG11. Awesome. Lots of thanks there for everybody that was involved. Some questions. So have we seen any impact on performance? Like, is there a dashboard where we can kind of see the before or after, or is it, yeah, I'll leave the question at that. Maybe Andrew is closest to it. I don't know, Jose.
Well, there's definitely a performance problem going on at the moment, but I have it's not necessarily got anything to do with it. There's no evidence that it's caused by that. So,
okay.
Our analysis in the first hours in the morning today is that we had some small gains in performance in general.
Okay. Is there a link to a dashboard you're watching, or are you getting that information elsewhere?
Yes, I can send you the link, no problem.
Thank you. Okay, and you can all read the comments below. Any hiccups? Pointing to the retro, Max typing it out. So a question I had, since we're moving to a yearly cadence for major upgrades now, do we have this process adequately documented so we can, I guess, more easily do it next year? I know we jumped 2 major versions this year, and maybe this is a one-off, but do we have a process down so it's going to be easier to pick up next year?
Well, we created the automation to stop the platform and to manage the whole traffic. And at the moment, we have a playbook as well, Ansible playbook, to execute the PG upgrade process for our environment that we could adapt for new technologies using like logical replication that could reduce the downtime and so on. So yes, we had efforts on this direction.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions or comments folks want to verbalize on the PG11 upgrade before we move on to the next items in the agenda? All right, take that as a no. Andrew, you said you don't know if that slowness is related to Postgres or not. Just something you're
no, we're just digging into it at the moment.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to what's been done. So database team met and discussed what area we should focus on for the first implementation of sharding. A couple areas we talked about were audit events and CI builds, and it was even recommended that we look at product analytics. We ended up narrowing in on audit events. CI builds, if I recall correctly, it would have been much more difficult to identify a partitioning key for that, and product analytics didn't have data yet, so we couldn't really test performance of before and after, so that's why we focused in on audit events. You can see the epics and issues created here, and on the access isolation issues, access patterns, Andreas has put a lot of work into that issue, so you can read up more on them. I think it's this issue here. And then database strategy was merged. And then what's happening next? Continue to work on audit events. Andreas, you want to talk about the time as a partitioning dimension? Andreas? You're on mute, or we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. It's working now?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, good. So the important thing is to figure out what the partitioning key is. And we were talking about adding multiple filtering possibilities to the audit log. And it's kind of important to settle on a default scope to make use of as a partitioning key. And what we're currently talking about is using the date range filter as a key. So that would always be present. And on top of that, you can add more filtering options, and that kind of informs the database schema that we're about to build.
Thank you. And then the other items that are related to the implementation for audit events are listed below. So partitioning key, migration strategy. And then something we're looking into, we were targeting this week for a kickoff for Postgres AI Enterprise Edition. There's still some licensing issues that we need to figure out that will impact timing. But the Postgres AI Enterprise Edition comes with the ability to quickly clone databases. It's called thin cloning, I believe is the correct terminology. And that would give us the ability to test with production-like data, lots of data. So we're going to look into that, whether we can or should use that and test it. And again, we need to figure out licensing issues on that and provisioning a server to where we can actually implement these thin clones. So more to come there. We were trying to target this week for kickoff, but we'll see how the licensing problems go.
By the way, it will take a few weeks to finish the PO. So not near, maybe even next week. It's too early to say we are ready. So I would rather to have the PO settled down before we deploy it.
Yep. Okay. So that'll push back our kickoff. That's fine. It's not blocking any work. It's something that we could use in the future for testing, and will help overall development practices with database. It's the goal of the Postgres Enterprise Edition evaluation. And I will, looks like John already linked to the issue there. Mech, verbalize your question.
Hey, thanks.
Comment.
So now that we are officially on PG11, we'll work on removing PG9 and PG10 node test pipeline. So this unlocks yet another efficiency that we've been waiting on. Just making sure all you are aware. And we already have an MR stage. We just resurrect that and then merge it in.
Okay. And then no blockers at the moment. Like Dan, you're typing up something you want to verbalize?
Yeah, sure thing. I think I'm still a little unsure of what capabilities PG11 has in terms of sharding. I know Andreas has mentioned a few times in several issues we've talked about it, where it's like, it doesn't really support the full feature set of what might be sharding, but I don't want to misrepresent that. I guess I'm particularly interested around whether there's certain configurations, be it separate schemas or separate databases that are actually able to be incorporated in sort of in a sharding environment. And I think I understand sharding in general, but I'm trying to work out what capabilities are there just to get a clear idea.
I can take it if you want. So basically, Postgres 11 per se doesn't bring any specific to sharding capabilities. Now, Sharding solution may be based on a capability called foreign data wrappers, and there is improvement in foreign data wrappers happening over every next major version since the last 3-4 years. Basically, the improvements in terms of foreign data wrappers is how much Postgres is able to push down to the nodes at the other side of the foreign data wrapper. So foreign data wrappers is a database to database connection. And so if you want to perform a complex query that will touch several shards and you use a foreign data wrapper, it will go to a master node coordinator node, which will have connections to the shards. And then it will be able to efficiently push, or more efficiently than previous versions, push down like filtering clauses instead of rather than fetching all the data and filtering in the master coordinator node side. So in this regards, Postgres 11 brings significant advantages. It also brings a lot of advantages in partitioning. In particular, brings what is called declarative partitioning, which is kind of a new breed of partitioning starting with Postgres 10, which makes partitioning better and simpler to use and also more performant. There is even more performance improvements, especially on partitioning on Postgres 12 than Postgres 11, but it's good enough already in Postgres 11.
Thanks very much for that, Alvaro. I appreciate it.
I'm also adding links to the approach that we explored a bit. There's no summary on the handbook if you want to read into that for foreign data wrappers. And what is also interesting to know is that the Postgres community there, they have a roadmap to native sharding. So that's still a bit down the road, but it's an interesting read how that is going to be accomplished. And I also link that on the agenda if you want to take a look.
Yeah, I would also say a little bit less officially that this community roadmap is kind of a best effort or a desire, and actually it's not shared by 100% of the community itself. Just because in the Postgres community, there's no one holding the rule, and there's no general direction. It depends on who is going to contribute what. So this may or may not happen. Actually, I know very well the person behind this approach, this proposal. It's called Bruce Momgen. And he's very positive about this, and he leads the directions in this way. But some other people want to approach in different ways, and this may or may not end up happening. Fortunately, Bruce Momgen's approach is quite smart, and instead of saying let's deliver this super big feature in the next release or next 2 years,
I lost you there, Alvaro. I'm not sure if you can hear us, but your audio went away there.
Yeah, I can hear you well. You cannot hear me?
I can now. Maybe it was me. It says my internet connection's unstable. I apologize. Maybe everyone else heard it. It was just me that dropped out.
I think it was just you, Dan. I could hear him.
Okay. So I will just saying that this community approach may actually end up or not happening. It is not a warranted line of development. Bruce's strategy is quite smart in that it tries to decompose a bigger feature into smaller features, such that each of those smaller features might make sense by itself and might provide an improvement for someone as by itself. And then people buy more easily than like a big feature, which Postgres is not really good at tackling. So it might end up happening, but there's not even warranty. So there's willing from part of the community to get to this point, might or might not get there.
And I think part of the confusion, Dan and I had talked about this before, but the clear explanation of sharding capabilities. So when we're talking about sharding, especially in this group, we're using, at least I'm using the terminology sharding interchangeably with Postgres 11 and partitioning with foreign data wrappers. That's the only implementation that we're looking at right now. So does that help clarify, Dan? Are you clear on what we're talking about?
Yeah, that's great. I think what I was, I apologize for taking everyone's time there. Maybe that was, I hope that was helpful for others. But for me, I was trying to understand exactly what we're talking about because I've heard a couple of different versions, but this seems to be consistent. And I can read through the handbook page or I guess that's a build that someone's done, but I could go read through that. That looks like a good place to start. Thank you.
And then you had the next question, Dan Croft.
Yeah, Dancroft. Yeah, and realistically, maybe this could be addressed in our next conversation that we're having. But I suppose what I'm wondering is if with this strategy that we're going forward with foreign data wrappers, I'll say it like an Australian, foreign data wrappers. I'm sorry, it's Monday. I'm making jokes in my head. I guess I'm looking to understand whether at what point, whether we know already or at what point we will understand what various configurations will be viable, performant, or recommended / required in terms of these longer reaching. You're supposed to put those in the document, Christopher. Yeah, as long as, so that's kind of what I'm thinking because there's planning going on around container registry. So I'm trying to work that out. So the question is, do we support separate schemas within a database? Will this be viable? Will it be performant? Are there sort of generalized sort of thoughts around this from the database team?
So perhaps it's worth to discuss GitLab COM separately from self-hosted installs. And for GitLab COM, it's pretty clear that we're likely going to put that into separate database cluster either from the start or eventually because the current cluster is already like pretty busy. So we're basically concerned with adding more workload to that. And there has been a recent issue for discussing that. Just adding that to the agenda. And then the other side is self-hosted, where we want to make it as simple as possible to run the database. And in this scenario, we can either we're discussing two options there. One is separate databases for services or putting them in the same database. And I think this is what we currently are still figuring out what is the most simplest approach for self-hosted installs.
Yeah, okay. I think I don't want to misrepresent the concerns we have around customers and drivers for business and all of that sort of stuff. So I know we've talked about this back and forward a lot. I think from my perspective in the container registry, you know, it's the engineers have made it clear that we can configure it whatever way we need to, and it's not a huge deal. So I'm happy with that. And I guess I've sort of wanted to echo Sid's concerns around being able to, you know, having their data be related to each other across all these databases is really important in terms of how our customers view the value of the product. So whether it's supported, whether we put it in different clusters or different databases, having it be accessible, auditable, is really valuable. So cool. That answers my question. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay. We have gotten through all of the topics on the agenda. Are there any other questions, comments anybody wants to follow up on or verbalize here?
So are we just using today's as the agenda for the call in 15 minutes? Is that kind of the thought process?
Yeah, this section. So when I had mentioned to Sid that we were moving forward with separate schemas in the same database, he said, I need you to educate me more on what that means and how it will work. And this was with respect to the container registry and how we're moving forward on that. And there's been, I will link in the issues, or if anybody else has them handy, we can link them in here for those that are attending the meeting, especially around container registry and some of the thoughts on impact on .com and for self-managed. So yeah, this is I can move it to the top actually. It'll make it easier for those joining the next meeting. So yep, this is the agenda doc.
Daniel, if you have any specific issues you want to, I know you had one particular point around justification that was kind of listed in one issue, might be worth putting in there.
Yeah, no worries. I actually added some thoughts to the last agenda, and I had misunderstood, but they're all linked down there. I'll go grab them and put them in the top here. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. I put a note in, the other topic was, I put in a note on Postgres AI. It looks like the issue itself actually has all the commentary around it. We had a incident, you know, if this doesn't help with catching those type of incidents, that's fine. But if it does, we should definitely make sure that that's included in the justification, because those are the kinds of things we definitely want to potentially prevent. So if we're looking at tooling, that would be kind of, so if I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume it didn't help with that, in which case I'll be looking for other justification from that perspective.
Yep. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everybody.